Hey guys, I'm back to talk about A Song of Ice and Fire into a microphone. And, well, first let me light the candles. There. The candles they kind of go with the name of the show. I named it Grey Sheep and Hedge Wizards. And the idea behind it is that it's, those are two names that people call each other. Some characters call the Maesters Grey Sheep. I think Marwyn the Mage does. And there are some references to hedge wizards, usually discrediting them as malpractitioners of magic. And so it has a bit to do with the Citadel of Old Town. But the Citadel has a tradition where when they initiate new acolytes, they send them beneath the Citadel for the night with a glass candle and a task to light their glass candle. And they all always fail. Yet somehow the tradition survives. It seems like nonsense until I consider that failing is the point of it. I think the Maesters are sending the acolytes down there to reinforce the idea that magic is dead or was never real. And they kind of teeter back and forth between those two attitudes, like Maester Lewin and Maester Crescent, and a lot of the Maesters do. And so they're contradictory attitudes, because something being dead doesn't mean that it isn't real. It's just not alive anymore, or it's sort of deactivated or forgotten. People forgot how to make it or do it or whatever. So anyway, the contradiction between those two attitudes suggests that magic is real and it's returning, along with a bunch of other things in the story. But anyway, hi, I'm Apples and Dragons. I'm absolutely crazy for these A Song of Ice and Fire books behind me. And the other ones too, but I'm here for those. And this is my regular show. I'm going to try to do it at least every couple weeks, preferably every week, but sometimes it's not possible. That's my picture in the background. That's the big one is a river. The little one is just some shit I drew. And I guess I should say something about spoilers, because people are kind of sensitive about that. I think too sensitive sometimes, but in this show, now and forevermore, I'm going to be talking about everything published in the series. You can assume it's spoilers everything that's published, and I should probably even say aired, because I might reference the TV show now and then, just small things, and rather just be safe than spoil things for people, or maybe more honestly get bitched at by people for spoiling things accidentally or whatever. So anyway, I wanted to talk about the Night of the Laughing Tree today. That's the topic, the Night of the Laughing Tree. And I think I'm going to read some of it, just sort of jog my memory and get the Song of Ice and Fire juices flowing. And I think it's in A Storm of Swords. So let's get it. Ugh. I got kind of cleaned up this time because I was kind of shabby last time, so I thought I'd make up for it. Okay, so hey, there's bookmarked. That's nice. So Mira's telling of the tourney at Harrenhal's story is my single most reread part of the entire series. And the reason is because everything about it screams, this is my ultimate challenge. Test your knowledge of me here, if you dare. Let me start from the beginning. Let's see. Bran, Jojen, and Hodor are sort of on the road together. And let me scooch a little closer for the microphone. And Bran is bored. He wants to hear a story. And so Mira tells him a story, and it goes like this. There was one night, said Mira, in the year of the false spring, the night of the laughing tree, they called him. He might have been a Crannogman, that one. Or not. Jojen's face was dappled with green shadows. Prince Bran has heard that tale 100 times, I'm sure. No, said Bran, I haven't. And if I have, it doesn't matter. Sometimes old Nan would tell the same story she'd told before, but we never minded, if it was a good story. Old stories are like old friends, she used to say. You have to visit them from time to time. That's true. Mira walked with her shield on her back, pushing an occasional branch out of the way with her frog spear. Just when Bran began to think that she wasn't going to tell the story after all, she began. Once there was a curious lad who lived in the Neck. He was small like all Crannogmen, but brave and smart and strong as well. He grew up hunting and fishing and climbing trees, and learned all the magics of my people. Bran was almost certain he had never heard this story. Did he have green dreams like Jojen? No, said Mira, but he could breathe mud and run on leaves, and change earth to water and water to earth, with no more than a whispered word. He could talk to trees and weave words, and make castles appear and disappear. I wish I could, Bran said plaintively. When does he meet the tree knight? Mira made a face at him. Sooner, if a certain prince would be quiet. I was just asking. So I'm going to pause there and talk about that. Jojen said, Prince Bran has heard that tale 100 times, I'm sure. And Bran says, no, I haven't. And this is a recurring thing throughout the A Song of Ice and Fire story, as Mira is telling the tourney at Harrenhal story. I think two, maybe even 3 times, Bran and Mira combined express surprise that Bran hasn't heard this story before, particularly from his father, which you could read as a suggestion that Mira and Jojen heard it from their own father, Howland. I think that's a safe interpretation. I think that's right. I think Howland probably told them this story over and over again. The story starts out from the point of view of the Crannogman, which is kind of weird because we refer to it as the Night of the Laughing Tree story. Whenever we talk about this story, we never talk about it as the Crannogman story. The Night of the Laughing Tree is the most noteworthy figure in it to us, the most memorable. It stands out. And there's a lot of debate about who it really was. And we'll get to that eventually. Maybe not in this episode, but I want to point out a relationship between the beginning of Mira's telling of this story and a short conversation they had right before she tells the story. So let me read that part. Do you know any stories? He asked the reeds all of a sudden. Mira laughed. Oh, a few. A few, her brother admitted. Hodor, said Hodor, humming. You could tell one, said Bran. While we walked, Hodor likes stories about knights. I do too. So Bran's trying to sort of manipulate Mira and Jojen to tell a story about knights by telling them that Hodor likes stories about knights. When it's really Bran who likes the stories about knights and Bran who wants to hear one about a knight. But before Mira tells it, they have this little back and forth. There are no knights in the neck, said Jojen. Above the water, his sister corrected. The bogs are full of dead ones, though. That's true, said Jojen. Andals and Iron Men, Freys and other fools, all those proud warriors who set out to conquer Greywater. Not one of them could find it. They ride into the neck, but not back out. And sooner or later they blunder into the bogs and sink beneath the weight of all that steel, and drown there in their armor. The thought of drowned knights under the water gave Bran the shivers. He didn't object, though. He liked the shivers. So it's a really short exchange, but it's very interesting, and it relates to the beginning of the story, of the Tourney at Harrenhal's story. Jojen says, there are no knights in the neck. And Mira corrects him and says, above the water. The bogs are full of dead ones, though. So what that exchange highlights is that it depends what you mean by knight. If you can allow that a dead knight is a real knight, then Jojen is wrong and Mira is right. But if you don't consider a dead knight a real knight, then Mira is wrong and Jojen is right. So what do you think? Is it fair to call a dead knight a knight? Or is it not? So this is a philosophical question. So this is a question about how you define a knight and how we as a group should define a knight, because we have to communicate with each other. And there are a bunch of smaller philosophical questions within those of, is a dead person still a person? And this is a distinction that is really, really old. It goes all the way back to, this is a distinction that Aristotle made, trying to distinguish when a thing is really itself versus when it isn't. And his idea was that a thing is really itself when it's fulfilling its function or its role. So it's a behaviorist way of looking at the world. One example he gives is that I could ask you, is it fair to call a glass eye an eye? And when you think about an eye and what its role is for seeing. And a glass eye can't see. So Aristotle's answer would be no. A glass eye is not really an eye. He would consider that a mostly false statement, though not without some truth. And George R. R. Martin would consider it the same way. But if you were to take something that doesn't look like an eye, like this camera, and then I asked Aristotle, is a camera an eye? He would have said that, yes, it's actually mostly true to say a camera is an eye because it can see. It fulfills the role of an eye. And so it's an interesting way of looking at the world, this role-based behaviorist way of you almost disregard what something seems like, and you're trying to look directly at what it's doing and what its motivations are if it's alive and what roles it's filling, whether that's socially or materially or whatever. And so when you look at the disagreement that Jojen and Mira are having about the knight, about the dead knight, looking at it in a role-based way, you could look at a knight and say the role of a knight is his vows. It's to protect the weak, the innocent, and women, and all this stuff, right? And that when a knight is no longer fulfilling those vows and that role, it's no longer truly a knight. And so a dead knight, being unable to fulfill that role, is no longer a knight. It would be mostly false to say that a dead knight is a knight. Looking at it in this way, in this role-based way. So now I want to sort of pull back a little bit and look at the gist of this interaction. Bran likes knights, and he wants to hear a story about a heroic knight because it inspires him, and he's always wanted to be a knight. And they're the heroes in stories, according to Bran. But Jojen says that the bogs are full of dead knights, and it gives Bran the shivers. So it kind of freaks him out that the role he considers heroic, is getting killed here in this, in the Reed region, the Crannogs. But that excites him, at least in his story. So he wants to hear more. It says, he didn't object though, he liked the shivers. And Jojen describes knights trying to go into the Crannogs, and then they sink in their armor because it's too heavy. I'm going to jump ahead in the Tourney of Harrenhal story to read a couple of lines that relate to what I'm talking about. Bran says, he likes the stories where the knights fight monsters. Sometimes the knights are the monsters, Bran. That was Mira. So the Reeds have a completely different concept of knights. To the Reeds, knights are the invaders in stories. But to Bran, knights are the heroes. And you can see how that relates to the beginning of the Night of the Laughing Tree story. Because it begins with the Crannogman, not the knight or the Starks or any of these other characters, roles, or figures that we would consider a hero or a main character. So throughout Mira's Tourney of Harrenhal story, all of the characters in it are represented in symbolic terms. They all have nicknames like the Dragon Prince and the Wolf Maid and the Young Pup and the Quiet Wolf, Storm Lord. So the characters' real names are not used for the story. And one interesting question you could ask is why? And the least interesting answer is just because the author wanted to make it colorful. That explanation works for literally everything in the book. Why did he write this? Or why does this exist in the form that it does? Well, just because the author wanted to make it colorful and entertain us. It's like, well, yeah, he wanted to do that, granted, but if that's the extent of your inquiry into what the story means, you're just not thinking. Like, there's no nice way to put it. You're just not using your head, you're being lazy. You're being dismissive of all of the deeper meanings that not only other people see in it, but that you see in it. Because if you don't see any deeper meanings in the story, and you don't feel anything deeper than just a sort of shallow entertainment, then what the hell are you doing here? I mean, that's kind of how I feel about people who say things like that, who say, well, it's just that way because the author wanted it to, or because he needed to move the plot. That's the other way they'll say it, is they'll make it like completely utilitarian. Like, he's just trying to make money and sell books. And he's just going to write whatever he thinks he has to write to make it as entertaining as he needs to make it in order to sell the most books. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? That is so stupid of an explanation. Like, do you know how much work it takes to write a book? This guy wrote fucking like 15 of them or some shit in this one series. I don't know how many. No, dude. There has to be a problem in the world that seriously bothers you in order to go to all the effort to write a story like this. So anyway, end of rant. The characters must have heard my rant because they're actually talking about stories in the next paragraph. He might have been a Crannogman, that one. Or not. Jojen's face was dappled with green shadows. Prince Bran has heard that tale 100 times, I'm sure. No, said Bran. I haven't. And if I have, it doesn't matter. Sometimes old Nan would tell the same story she'd told before, but we never minded, if it was a good story. Old stories are like old friends, she used to say. You have to visit them from time to time. It's like, okay, why do you think you have to visit stories again from time to time? Just so you can be entertained again? No, stories contain meanings that are difficult to extract, but get easier as you get wiser. And you get wiser as you get older. So you got to revisit them later to sort of extract the meanings that you missed the first time or the first several times or whatever. Okay, that's true. Mira walked with her shield on her back, pushing an occasional branch out of the way with her frog spear. Just when Bran began to think that she wasn't going to tell the story after all, she began. Once there was a curious lad who lived in the Neck. He was small, like all Crannogmen, but brave and smart and strong as well. He grew up hunting and fishing and climbing trees, and learned all the magics of my people. Bran was almost certain he had never heard this story. Did he have green dreams like Jojen? No, said Mira, but he could breathe mud and run on leaves, and change earth to water, and water to earth, with no more than a whispered word. He could talk to trees and weave words, and make castles appear and disappear. So right from the beginning, the story leads you to believe that the Crannogman is the Knight of the Laughing Tree, by associating the Crannogman with trees, heavily. It says he can run on leaves, he can talk to trees, just all this nature-y crap, right? All these nature-y powers. It's like, alright, that sounds like the kind of guy who would, when he's choosing a sigil for his shield, would choose a tree. And why not a weirwood tree? That's like the coolest of all the trees in the world. And the people of the Crannogs still worship the old gods, so that checks out. But Jojen has already said, he's made a comment that suggests that maybe Jojen doesn't think the Crannogman is the Knight of the Laughing Tree. Because when Mira said, the Knight of the Laughing Tree, they called him, he might have been a Crannogman, that one. Jojen said, or not. So Jojen could just be misleading the audience, Bran and Hodor. Or he could be saying what he really thinks. He doesn't think that the Crannogman is the Knight of the Laughing Tree. So it's ambiguous. There's some uncertainty there in the interpretation. And it's just lingering. But the potential that Jojen doesn't think it's the Crannogman is there. And what Jojen thinks about the story is pretty relevant because, based on all of their questions that you haven't heard this story before, all of their surprise about that, that would suggest that Jojen has heard this story several times, and a long time ago, originally, and so he's had a lot of time to think about it and come to a more sophisticated conclusion of who the Knight of the Laughing Tree might be. So the Crannogman has a bunch of nature powers, and it's unclear how literal we can take these. I mean, run on leaves, that's a little bizarre. May as well be walking on water. Change earth to water and water to earth. Like, I can think of a mundane explanation for that. Maybe it just means he knows some methods to drain the water out of mud and make it earth that he could use for building some sort of clay building or whatever structure he's trying to build. Earth to water is a little more difficult. I don't know how you turn earth to water, but run on leaves, like the mundane explanation for that might be he's just really good at traveling the treetops, like a monkey or something. So he's not literally running on the leaves. There's no foot to leaf contact, but there's definitely, if you interpret run to just mean travel, so it'd be like a role-based interpretation of the word run. It works. He's just swinging from branches, or maybe even jumping from branches using his feet. The no more than a whispered word part, like he has to say a spell or something to change earth to water and water to earth, which is hard to think of a mundane explanation for that. But if you think of one, let me know. It could also just be like creative license. He could talk to trees. So we've already seen that in the story. That's the visions, the werewood visions that Bran sees. That's not literally talking to trees, but it's communing with trees. And so you can abstract the word talk to communicate, and then commune is the root word of communicate. And so it's a good enough translation. It's true enough for a sensationalized story. It says, and weave words and make castles appear and disappear. Weaving words, I'm not sure what that would mean even as magic. I guess it's creating new words, maybe? Or maybe just being good with words? I don't know. Maybe it's story construction. That could make sense too. And make castles appear and disappear. That part's pretty easy. She's already said that when people invade the neck to try to find Greywater Watch, they can't find it. They say the castle moves. It's like, all right, considering the environment, probably what's happening is that this region's not precisely mapped out. And so when people try to invade it or even just map it out, the water flooding the region confuses the hell out of them and they get lost. And so it seems like a different route to get to the castle every time they go to it. And so the myth that emerges from the difficulty of finding the castle when the waters move is that the castle moves. So that's the mundane explanation for the magic. But as I've found with this story, that's never the complete explanation. It's always some combination of the mundane and the fantastic, or the magic, or whatever. One of the things you notice when you read A Song of Ice and Fire, pretty quickly, is that it's a story in which perspective is everything. The chapters are literally perspective-based. Every word in the book is written from the perspective of the POV character of that chapter. And having different POVs, you can see when those characters come into conflict, how each one of them is missing part of the picture of everything that's going on, and how their lack of knowledge predicts and then characterizes their conflicts that they're going to have in the future. And then you can see how those conflicts could have been avoided if people had just done a better job of looking at things from the point of view of the other person. And so it's a story where perspective is everything. And so the Tourney of Harrenhal, being full of so many different characters, all at the same event. Important characters, by the way. They're all nobility. Is one of the things about the Tourney of Harrenhal story that screams, "This is my ultimate challenge. Test your knowledge of me here, if you dare." And it's also a sort of ground zero for a bunch of the central mysteries of the story. Like, it's where Rhaegar crowned Lyanna, the Queen of Love and Beauty. It's where the attempt to overthrow the Mad King took place. It's where, presumably, Rhaegar met or fell in love with Lyanna and maybe even decided to kidnap and rape her, according to the official narrative in Westeros. It's kind of where Robert's rebellion began in a lot of ways. And it's also tied up with a lot of the parentage mysteries, like Jon Snow and young Griff. Mostly because with all these important characters being in the same place, this is like the ultimate opportunity for a whole bunch of different love matches going on. The tourney lasted for weeks, so there's plenty of time for people to fall in love and make babies. A lot of the discussion about the Night of the Laughing Tree centers around who it was. Some of the top contenders are Lyanna Stark, Howland Reed, Ned Stark, Brandon Stark, Rhaegar Targaryen, and I've heard some other ones, but the real divide in the interpretation of the Night of the Laughing Tree situation is not happening regarding its identity. It's happening regarding the knight's motivations. And the story is constructed specifically to elicit that divide in its audience. And so the first question I like to ask people about the Night of the Laughing Tree is, what do they think was motivating him or her? Fundamentally. And the answer to that question has two branches, I've found. Some portion of the readers say that he was avenging the Crannogman. Or they'll say something similar to that, like he was trying to get justice for the Crannogman. And another portion of the readers say that he was trying to sort of fix the situation between the knights and the squires. That actually it didn't have everything to do with Howland. It certainly had some to do with it. But the knight also wanted to get these knights to stop being negligent and teach their squires honor. Maybe even so that when the squires become knights themselves, they won't be as negligent as their knights were. And he can kind of repair the institution of knighthood in whatever small way that he can. And some few of these readers even go a little further and say that what the knight was actually trying to do was to fix his whole society, because his whole society is based on knighthood. That's the quintessential mode of class advancement in their world. And so it's extremely important to the stability and social fabric of Westeros. And that divide in the interpretation between what was the knight's motivation, really, is more important than the divide in the interpretation of who was he. The Knight of the Laughing Tree was trying to avenge the Crannogman side of the argument. Teeters between using the word revenge and the word justice. So there's a conflation there happening between revenge and justice. And the distinction between those two things is a huge topic in A Song of Ice and Fire. It comes up in the first chapter when Ned describes his code of justice. And then it comes up consistently in instances of justice. For example, when Ned is ruling on the Iron Throne in place of Robert while Robert's out hunting, he has to decide who to send to apprehend or kill the Mountain, Sir Gregor Clegane, for his crimes. And Loras Tyrell offers to do it, but Ned rejects him and chooses Beric Dondarrion instead. And Ned's comment about why is very interesting. Let me actually find it, and I'll read it. Alright, it's a Game of Thrones Eddard 11, page 386. Mark Piper asks, "Do we have your leave to take our vengeance against Sir Gregor then?" "Vengeance," Ned said. "I thought we were speaking of justice. Burning Clegane's fields and slaughtering his people will not restore the king's peace, only your injured pride." He glanced away before the young knight could voice his outraged protest, and addressed the villagers. "People of Sharer, I cannot give you back your homes or your crops, nor can I restore your dead to life, but perhaps I can give you some small measure of justice, in the name of our king, Robert." So Ned's response helps us suss out what his idea of justice is and what it isn't. He says, burning Clegane's fields and slaughtering his people will not restore the king's peace, only your injured pride. So from that we can say, to Ned, justice is not about restoring people's injured pride. That's what revenge is about. He glanced away before the young knight could voice his outraged protest, and addressed the villagers. "People of Sharer, I cannot give you back your homes or your crops, nor can I restore your dead to life." So from that, we might be able to say, Ned's idea of justice is that justice is not about giving back things that are beyond your power to give. He can't restore the dead to life. Nobody can. There's no undo button for that. But what he can do is that he can stop the person who's responsible for it and put him in jail or execute him or whatever. So that's what he does. Ned says, "The first men believed that the judge who called for death should wield the sword, and in the north we hold to that still. I mislike sending another to do my killing. Yet it seems I have no choice." He gestured at his broken leg. So that part we already knew. That's directly in the first chapter. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. One of the things it means is that do your own killing, in short. Don't get other people to do it for you. And I think it's about making sure, preventing degrees of separation from forming between the sentencing and the execution of it. Because you could see how if the person making the sentence were to become too distanced from the blood and guts consequences of his decisions, he would tend to slide into tyranny of just throwing out execution sentences all over the place to deal with every petty little problem that comes up. "Lord Eddard!" The shout came from the west side of the hall, as a handsome stripling of a boy rode forth boldly. Out of his armor, Sir Loras Tyrell looked even younger than his 16 years. He wore pale blue silk, his belt a linked chain of golden roses, the sigil of his house. I beg you the honor of acting in your place. Give this task to me, my lord, and I swear I shall not fail you. Littlefinger chuckled. Sir Loras, if we send you off alone, Sir Gregor will send us back your head with a plum stuffed in that pretty mouth of yours. The mountain is not the sort to bend his neck to any man's justice. I do not fear Gregor Clegane, Sir Loras said haughtily. Ned eased himself slowly back onto the hard iron seat of Aegon's misshapen throne. His eyes searched the faces along the wall. Lord Beric, he called out. Thoros of Myr, Sir Gladden, Lord Lothar. The men named stepped forward one by one. Each of you is to assemble 20 men, to bring my word to Gregor's keep. 20 of my own guards shall go with you. Lord Beric Dondarrion, you shall have the command, as befits your rank. The young lord with the red gold hair bowed. As you command, Lord Eddard. Ned raised his voice, so it carried to the far end of the throne room. In the name of Robert of the House Baratheon, the first of his name, King of the Andals and the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm, by the word of Eddard of the House Stark, his hand, I charge you to ride to the Westlands, with all haste, to cross the red fork of the Trident under the King's flag, and there bring the King's justice to the false knight Gregor Clegane. And to all those who shared in his crimes, I denounce him, and attaint him, and strip him of all rank and titles, of all lands and incomes and holdings, and do sentence him to death. May the gods take pity on his soul. When the echo of his words had died away, the Knight of Flowers seemed perplexed. Lord Eddard, what of me? Ned looked down on him. From on high, Loras Tyrell seemed almost as young as Robb. No one doubts your valor, Sir Loras, but we are about justice here, and what you seek is vengeance. He looked back to Lord Beric. Ride at first light. These things are best done quickly. He held up a hand. The throne will hear no more petitions today. So that's a very interesting ruling, because there's a little bit of mystery about why does Ned consider Loras to be after revenge rather than justice? And I think there are little clues to answer that. You just have to look at Loras's behavior. Lord Eddard, the shout came from the west side of the hall, as a handsome stripling of a boy strode forth boldly. So he's coming forth boldly, and he's also young, and I think he's described as haughty. He's also overconfident. He thinks he can take the mountain. He says, I'm not afraid. So, what do you think Loras wants? What's his motivation? And try to go deeper than he wants to kill Gregor. Like, what does he actually want? He wants to distinguish himself. He's a young knight, and he's a very good swordsman. And he sees an opportunity to serve his king and the kingdom, and he's trying to seize it. And so, from this, one thing we could say about Ned's justice is that justice is not about distinguishing yourself, or anybody, actually. So Ned chooses Beric Dondarrion instead, who's an older knight, more experienced, but maybe most importantly of all, is not out to distinguish himself. He didn't step forward boldly, with a haughty attitude, and try to act like he's not afraid of the mountain, like Loras did. I forget how old Beric is. I think he's like 29 or something. Maybe 30, maybe early 30s. I need a bookmark. The Queen of Clubs. That'll do. All right. So the distinction between justice and revenge is a huge topic in this story, and it's very important for the Knight of the Laughing Tree, because the same divide is happening in the part of the audience that thinks the Knight of the Laughing Tree's motivation was to avenge the Crannogman. It's like, okay, in what way is that justice? In what way did the Knight of the Laughing Tree's actions make anything actually better for the Crannogman? If the Knight was trying to avenge or get justice for the Crannogman, then there are a lot of questions that need answering. Like, why didn't the Knight of the Laughing Tree give the horses and armor to the Crannogman? Like the horses and armor that he won from the three knights. Wouldn't that have been a better revenge? Like, a better fuck you to the knights and their squires by extension? Because you know when he does that, the first thing these knights are probably going to do is go smack the crap out of their squires. Like, this is your fault. You beat him up. You're the reason that we lost our horses and armor. Anyway, there are a bunch of places in the story where this distinction between literal and symbolic justice comes up. When Robb is made a king and he's at war against Tywin Lannister, after Ned dies, Catelyn argues with the Northern Lords and Robb, and she says that it's time to call off the war. Ned is dead. We're not accomplishing anything here, actually. We're only accomplishing symbolic things. Like, your purpose here is to avenge your dad because it'll feel good. But how does that make anything better for anyone but you? So that's why that scene where Catelyn fails to convince Robb and the other lords to put down the crown, the kingship, and call off the war and go home is the precise scene where Robb was doomed. Thematically doomed. He had to die at that point. Because he was on the path of revenge rather than justice. And he didn't notice it. Or if he did notice it, he was ignoring it. I consider all of the mistakes that Robb made after that point to be shaky dog mistakes, basically. They don't matter. They're just there to distract from the real issue. The origin point of Robb's downfall. Which is a whole nother big discussion that fans like to have. Where exactly did Robb screw up? What did he do wrong? What could he have done differently to win and stay alive and protect everyone that he wanted to protect? Robb's a really cool character that I haven't really dug into very deeply. But he's not a POV character, so I think that's why. But I do like him. There's not much to dislike about him, really. He's a cool guy. He's a good guy thrust into very difficult situation at too young of an age. And he was doing splendidly for a great portion of it. I'm way off the Night of the Laughing Tree topic at this point. I'm going to call it quits for now. Thanks for coming, guys. I'll see you next time.